Yoendrys Gomez pitched wonderfully last night, but I thought the White Sox had way better options. Let's discuss on today's episode of Lockdown White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan, a contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the fan side of the network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Additionally, follow or subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platforms. Yoendrys Gomez pitched 5 innings and struck out 7 as the White Sox won 9-6 last night against the Detroit Tigers. However, is he a potential long-term piece or just a Jose Urena? Let's discuss in the first segment if the Sox made the right decision. Then things are looking better on the south side than on the north side. And finally, it's a way back Wednesday. Let's relive the Field of Dreams game that happened 4 years ago yesterday. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so I love it when a pitcher just has that ball dancing. You know, I like to call it the ball dancing test. Basically, you know, when you just look at it, the eye test is likely matching up with the spin rates, and you're just seeing that ball moving all over. Not just commanding, but like there's movement, whether it's on the fastball rising up, whether it's the cutter actually, completely cutting. It's just moving, and it's just beautiful to watch. And that's where, like, for example, I can see the traditionalists being like, well, why does spin rate even matter if I can actually see the ball moving? And you're right. To me, spin rate matters in terms of just actual overall player evaluation when you're just trying to pay the player or who's better and that stuff. But to me, where I really want to look at spin rate is when it comes to actual like struggles. That's one of those things where like maybe the data should be used to solve problems like, hey, the spin rate's down. Whereas Yoendrys Gomez, man, I don't need to know what the spin rate was because he had that ball moving and grooving. And it was really fun to see. And he looked nothing like the pitcher who had an ERA over 6 this season with stops with the Yankees, Dodgers, and the White Sox bullpen before getting DFA'd by the White Sox. So he's been DFA'd 3 times, 2 by a contender, and 1 by the White Sox. So you're on hard times when the White Sox are like, I don't even want you in my bullpen. But someone in the organization must like him because he did get outrighted to Charlotte after he cleared, and he actually got converted to a starter. So someone must have saw something in the front office that's like, you know what? Not only should we keep him at least around in the organization, but let's convert him to a starter. Let's move him over to a starter. Because he's been doing relief at the major leagues. And he was doing quite well in Charlotte. 2.12 ERA. And the only time I ever really do cite ERA for Charlotte as every day, as you probably heard me say, is when it's 3 or below. Because a sub-3 ERA in Charlotte, that's impressive. Because again, of how that ballpark is such a bandbox. So you're doing something well there. He had 64 Ks to and a 1.26 whip with an opponent batting average of 217. So I get why he gets the call up. However, is he nothing more than Jose Urena? Just a guy that's filling time until the end of the season, because that's what Urena did in 2023. And that's why I'm just kicking around. Was he actually the right choice to get a shot in the rotation? But then again, he might have been the only option because everybody else at Charlotte, I'm not trusting. I mean, we've already seen the Owen White experience in the bullpen. He's not doing anything spectacular. I definitely don't want Mike Clevenger ever again. And outside of Shane Murphy and Tanner McDougal, that'd be your only 2 options. But first of all, those 2 are getting very, very close. Well, Murphy's already past his career innings. And McDougal is on an innings limit because he's getting close to his career innings. So considering the White Sox have no draft pick investment ever in Gomez, I think he's actually just benefiting from being at the right place at the right time, because it sounds like to me this is like when you're looking at what the White Sox did by bringing Gomez up, the only critique I could say is, first of all, I think the White Sox should have went with Murphy because they could have used a lefty in the rotation, obviously. And he has a 1.53 ERA. But I understand if they were like looking at it and saying, even though he's a 14th round pick from a couple of years back, we've still invested a lot of time. We don't want to just keep pushing his arm and then, what if there's a major injury? And as Brian Bannister has said, the pitching director, he's got some of the best stuff in their system. And he's already at 105 and 2/3 innings. That's his career high. So you got to wonder, are the White Sox just going into that arm protection mode of saying, you know what? Maybe, we're going to have him compete maybe next year because they're probably going to need, they need to add 2 starting pitchers after Jonathan Cannon's demise. So maybe it's just, hey, let's just get through the season. Maybe if there is another injury, he's our option. But right now, let's just get him through the rest of the minors, get him his arm built up, and then we'll take a look at him next year. And I understand, I get why they didn't call up Tanner McDougal because they've got him on an innings limit now. I mean, they pulled him after the 3rd inning where Birmingham was clearly blowing out Pensacola. I mean, they were up, I think, 9-2 when he got pulled. So while I want him to be developed to his ceiling, if he even does get a cup of coffee, it's likely going to be in the bullpen because, again, they're watching his innings. And considering that they already did an opener on Monday, it was clear they needed somebody to eat up 5 or 6 innings, which Gomez did. And again, there's just no other real options right now. So I think Gomez is just at the right place at the right time because we talked about Hagen Smith's fall from grace in the rankings and his command issues right now completely rules out last year's number 1 draft pick. I mean, Noah Schultz is on the 7-day IL. I mean, there's just not any really good options. Gomez was left. I mean, he's pretty much the only option in terms of, hey, let's see what we can get out of this guy because, hey, if his arm does blow out, well, we never drafted him. We never invested a ton of time in him. And also, again, this isn't meant to scare you that, hey, the White Sox can't develop pitching or, same old White Sox. Here's the cynicism. Because Gomez's turnaround might be evidence of player development, according to manager Will Venable. This is from Sports Illustrated's Jack Ankeny. This is the quote that he got. Quote, Gomez was outstanding, Venable said. I think you look at it organizationally for us to have claimed him and then gets back in the minor leagues, gets to work. Our PD group there in AAA did an outstanding job. For him as somebody who had struggled with command to find that. He's got a lot of different pitches, and for him to command them like he is now, you see the results. It's huge. A big win for our group down there, and a really nice to see a guy go to work and get positive results. And the other thing is, again, what the White Sox are experiencing this year is the exact opposite of last year. Last season, they had a lot of young options because all of them were healthy. That's why, again, I was so frustrated that Chris Flexen was still getting starts after the trade deadline. But this year, you got no Drew Thorpe, no Kai Bush, no Mason Adams, no high-end pitchers that are available that are young that you could say, yeah, we're going to go to this guy now. I mean, you got maybe Tyler Alexander if you want to try him out again as a starter. And I don't think they want to do that. And not every young arm is going to pan out, to be fair to the White Sox, like Nick Nastrini and Jesse Schultens. And sometimes you just got to cut bait and see what the next guy can do. Kind of like what they just did with Jared Shuster. DFA'd him. And some guys are just destined to be relievers. And it's better to find out in the minors than it is obviously in the majors, like with Jairo Iriarte and Tyler Schweitzer. So that's why there's just no need to panic because you've got guys coming back next year. So it's no need to be like, oh my God, Gomez is the only option. I can't believe it. Well, it's just, this is the circumstances. And Martin Perez, he is back. White Sox brought him off the 15-day IL. So at least you got another guy to now cover innings through the rest of the season. And if you just got to ride out with Gomez, okay, I'm fine with it. But what is certain with Jonathan Cannon's demotion, the Sox will need to add at least 2 starters to the rotation next year. And maybe Gomez makes his case, or maybe he just gets you through the season. Well, speaking of a season, the Northsiders, they were having a good one until recently. While the Sox, they were having a bad one until recently. Let's discuss how it's interesting that the good vibes have shifted from the South Side to the South Side after the break. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had a service emergency, like a bursted pipe. If the first plumber didn't answer, did you wait? No. You called the next one. And that's why having a reliable business line is so important. That's why you need Open Phone. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system that helps you streamline and scale customer communication, all from an app on your phone or computer. Do you juggle 2 phones just to keep business and personal calls separate? Open Phone solved that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. So no more, hey, who's handling this? And I'm always telling my friends who run their own business, get Open Phone. You should be worrying about making your business successful, not your phone needs. Open Phone is offering Locked On White Sox listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. That's openphone.com/LockedOnMLB. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms, so make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so Cubs fans, let me preface this by saying I know I shouldn't have your team in my mouth. I know I shouldn't have the Cubs, keep the Cubs out your mouth, that type of stuff. Yeah, I know that. I know I shouldn't be talking smack. But I will say this, I'm enjoying the Northsiders meltdown and drinking the tears of freaking out Cubs fans. It is so enjoyable watching Cubs social media right now. It is entertaining. And maybe I'm enjoying the figurative drinking of tears of sadness because it's not needed. You don't need to be freaking out. It's not necessary. Let me give you the PSA. It's not necessary. Okay? And it's not because I'm on the other side of things and I've seen worse. It's just not necessary because you can still make the playoffs. But I'm also going to enjoy right now the White Sox having the better record since the All-Star break and all the good vibes going on right now. And the one thing I will say, to be fair, and what I wanted to throw out there is, and I thought to myself, let's flip our positions here. Would us White Sox fans be melting down on social media like the Cubs fans are? Would we be freaking out? Would we be like, one of their, like, would Missy Carroll, one of the White Sox social media darlings, would she be like going to Cleveland wearing the opponent's hat, trying to put the hex on and enjoying if Cleveland potentially lost, and then only to show videos of her getting heartbroken if there's a walk-off home run like some Cubs social media person's doing? Which, hey, I get the content. I'm not here to attack, but would that be happening? I don't know. Actually, I think it would be because, think back to 2005 when we were all losing our minds when Cleveland went on the heater. But you literally got like Cubs fans going up to American Family Field to curse the Brewers when the Cubs aren't even playing the Cubs. When the Cubs aren't even playing the Brewers. You got folks going absolutely bonkers that the Cubs blew their NL Central lead and that they're 10-12 since the All-Star break. While us White Sox fans, we're daring to dream with a 12-win record in that same time. And yes, I know the context that the White Sox have only won 2 of their last 9 games. I get it. It's just more of, it's just something that's been bothering me, yet it's so enjoyable because it's not bothering me. It's just interesting because I've thought, it's been so long since the White Sox obviously been competitive. But it's one of those things where, again, a season is so long that things can shift and change. And I think the other reason why I'm just wanting to discuss this is that got lost last year because it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. But not realizing that, baseball seasons typically are ebbs and flows. You try to have, obviously the more winning teams obviously have a lot more highs than lows. But I have just never seen this sort of meltdown like this in forever. And I thought that was absolutely gone. And I know Mets fans and Yankees fans too, they're just losing their minds right now. And it's like, it's August 13th. And guess what? 6 teams now make the playoffs. All you got to do is get in. And again, I shouldn't throw too many stones because, again, we were all getting super nervous in 2005 when Cleveland went on that tear and the White Sox didn't win at the same rate as they were in the second half as they did in the first half. And I remember everybody being like, oh my God, here comes Cleveland. And they got within a game and a half. But then guess what the White Sox did at the end? They quickly turned it around and got super hot and won the World Series because variance matters in October. It's all about just get to the playoffs. And The other thing is, like, the alternative for the Sox in 2005 is if they did somehow follow the division lead, there was maybe no chance that they could not even make the playoffs at all because there was only one wild card spot. Cleveland didn't get in the playoffs because, again, one wild card spot. Now you got 3. And looking at the standings, the Cubs are 3.5 up and tied with the Padres for the 4 seed. They should have enough talent to still get to the playoffs. I mean, the Mets are falling apart. And it's not like the Reds are doing anything special to where it's like, hey, we got to be totally nervous. So Cubs fans got a great chance of making the playoffs. I mean, and again, it's the one tournament where variance plays a huge role. I mean, and hockey and baseball playoffs are like now the 2 playoff postseason tournaments where all you got to do is get in and everybody has a chance. In hockey, you just got to have a good, if you got a goaltender standing on his head, you got a chance to go far. In baseball, variance. Because you have a bad 3 days in the wild card round or even a bad 2 days, you're done. There's no tomorrows. That's the thing. There's not many tomorrows. And in baseball, you do go through rough patches. I mean, think about it. The White Sox in 2021, they had an amazing season. And they got their teeth kicked in by the Astros in the ALDS. The Dodgers have won just 2 World Series during their amazing playoff runs that they've been having. And one of them was in a pandemic, shortened season. And I mean, I'm seeing folks saying Kyle Tucker isn't worth $500 million because of his recent hitting struggles. Really? He's had 2 bad months? And we can't pay him $500 million. Now, obviously, I'm a White Sox fan here, and I can't even fathom my team ever spending that money because they've never even spent $100 million. But if I had the opportunity to get Kyle Tucker, I'm signing him. If Justin Ishbia, for example, assumed control tomorrow and said, yeah, let's go after Kyle Tucker, let's go. He's just having 2 bad months. And again, he's in a slump, but this isn't like trying to rationalize getting rid of, like, say, Luis Robert Jr. Robert Jr. has an injury history. And also, no major prospect capital was ever dealt to get him. And this was a guy the White Sox signed. They're not, the Cubs technically halfway went all in. I mean, you let Tucker walk because of a July and August slump. Well, in the long run, that deal is going to come back looking incredibly awful. Unless, again, you turn things around. I guess I'm just saying, instead of trying to curse the Brewers or freaking out, how about just focus on making the playoffs and go from where, anything can happen then when you get there. And I guess that's what I'm saying, because it's just been interesting to see. And I don't know if you guys are enjoying it like I am. I'm loving it. It's so entertaining. It's better than reality television. Well, speaking of making the playoffs, the White Sox last made it in 2021 in a season, although everything was all downhill after the Field of Dreams game. And let's revisit, though, that magical game on this week's Way Back Wednesday segment. We've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping, and that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as they get closer to showtime. You can save up to 60% off with killer last-minute deals, and I'm always checking Game Time for great deals to sporting events and concerts. I'm a huge fan of Game Time zone deals. Game Time will pick the best seats in your section for you while also finding the best deal. So it just makes it so simple. And what's even better, the app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there's no surprises. And with Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. Again, as you can see, still in the temporary location. Have to get my carpet ripped out in my basement now. Tried to save it, couldn't. and it won't be fixed until they're ripping it out, I think, on Sunday. So I will be in here for the rest of the week and then 3 more days next week. So that will be the temporary location with right here. All right. So August 12th, 2021, one of the most iconic moments in Sox franchise history happened. Tim Anderson hits the walk-off home run in an Iowa cornfield as the White Sox came back to beat the Yankees 9-8 in the first ever Field of Dreams game. And everything's been downhill ever since. I mean, that should have been like they're ascending. And in hindsight being 2020, that was the high point. That was it. Other than the blackout game of Game 3 against the Astros, where they came back and then they won 12-6. That was the high point of the rebuild. I mean, it was amazing. And on that day, things, you think about it too, like why things have kind of just gone downhill. Think about it. On that day, things were going great for the White Sox. They were good. They were leading the Central. TA was making his case to be the face of the league. And honestly, MLB got a special venue game right. Obviously, fast forward, Tim Anderson is now out of baseball, a completely shell of himself. And the White Sox are one of the worst franchises in the game. But still, they lived up to the billing to be worthy of such an iconic game. And I loved how they had the players enter from the cornfield like the movie. That was great. And that was a nice touch. You had Kevin Costner come out. He kind of stands in the field, and then the players emerge. And look, I know there's some of you out there that think Field of Dreams is an overrated baseball movie. But first, I can actually relate to that flick, as I've butted heads with my old man, especially as a teenager. But it still gets me, and I can still relate to when, at the ending where he says, "Dad, want to have a catch?" That's something that I think all sons will love to have with their old man. Hey, Dad, want to have a catch? That's why it was so cool the next year, obviously, Ken Griffey Jr. and Ken Griffey Sr. playing catch to start the game, coming from the corner. That was kind of cool. Although it should not have been the Cubs versus the Reds. That should have been the White Sox game. And if you want to draw from the Cubs' popularity in Iowa, you should have had it be Cubs and Sox then. Although I don't think either team is giving up that type of home game for the gate that they draw. But still, you could have had White Sox Reds. That would have been interesting. Again, because the movie is celebrating Shoeless Joe Jackson and the tragedy of him getting thrown out for the 1919 World Series when the White Sox lost to the Reds. And also, I do hope they go back to the Field of Dreams at some point, and they need to figure out better special venues if they want to do that, because especially after the Motor Speedway debacle, I mean, yeah, stick to either, the cornfield in Iowa, or, try a Sandlot game, or, go back to when they played a game at the Little League World Series field. That was kind of neat. Those types of things. Think of different things than, hey, let's combine NASCAR and baseball. That still didn't make sense to me. But obviously, what made the Field of Dreams game so great was not only the production, but it was a great game. As TA said after the game, the fans came to see a show, and a show was put on. You had all the stars performing in that game. You got Aaron Judge hitting 2 home runs, Jose Abreu hits a homer, even Eloy, who was sort of a star within the White Sox at the time. The star was starting to fade, obviously. He hits a home run. The Sox claw back from a 3-run hole after Aaron Judge hits that blast to put him up, to go up 7-3 in the 4th on a Samuel Zavala home run. And by the way, Zavala is an underrated hero of that game, because he draws that 9th inning walk that allowed TA to actually have the walk-off home run. Remember, Zavala is not on base. TA just ties the game. But obviously before that, you did have the tragedy. The tragedy in that Liam Hendricks falters when he gives the 2-run, gives up the 2-run blast to Judge in the 9th, and then the 2-run go-ahead home run to Giancarlo Stanton. And I saw somebody, a Yankees fan on social media. It was funny. He posted the video of Giancarlo Stanton hitting the 2-run homer, and he goes, and he hits the 2-run homer to walk off the game as MLB decided to end the game after the top of the 9th. It was kind of neat and that type of stuff. And think about that too. If you're a Yankees fan, I mean, talk about the swing of emotions in that game too on your end. Here you come back down 7-3 in the 9th to take the lead. You're 2 major stars come through big and you lose because Samuel Zavala draws a walk. And then obviously Tim Anderson, who was a star in his own right at the time, absolutely blasts the ball into the Iowa night sky. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with Brett Hafner of SoxOn35th.com to just see how many wins the White Sox will have at the end of the season. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding Yoendrys Gomez being an interesting choice to be the young pitcher to be given a shot in the rotation, the vibes being good on the south side where they are terrible on the north side, and this week's Way Back Wednesday segment. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at TajDub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.